thank you all for joining me on my new series, The Key to Happiness is Satisfaction. I'm Dr. Jennifer Guttman, and as a psychologist for 30 years, I've seen firsthand how many people feel like they're failing at being happy, which is why I wrote my new book, Beyond Happiness, The 6 Secrets of Lifetime Satisfaction, to encourage people to strive for something different, satisfaction, because satisfaction is sustainable, which is why I want to start a satisfaction revolution. Each time I talk to a guest, I ask for their experiences of happiness versus their experiences of satisfaction. Today, I'm so happy to have on my Instagram Live, Gabriel Klingman. I've met him before. He's amazing. So much fun. I want to tell you a little bit about him. Gabriel's been referred to as the entrepreneur therapist and the Sherlock Holmes of business. In 2019, he left his job as a barista at Starbucks and to go to a startup. 12 months later, he had worked his way up to an equity level position in the company, which he then helped sell for mid-7 figures amount. He's a published author, public speaker, and regular contributor to multiple financial and entrepreneurial magazines. He currently divides his time between working for an investment fund, hosting a successful podcast called Coffee with Klingman, and feeding his passion for traveling. So thank you so much for coming on and talking to me tonight.
Of course.
I'm very excited about this.
I am very excited for this convo. This is going to be a blast.
So could you start off by telling me a little bit about how you would describe situations in which you feel happy versus situations in which you feel satisfied?
Absolutely. The difference there for me tends to be much more of a spike versus a general high level consistency. So I am a very passionate person. When I'm all in, I am all in. That's just who I am. And so for me, so much of happiness tends to be linked to that. It's very similar in how I look at it anyway, and how I've experienced it. It's where you're all in, you have this massive spike. And anyone else who has experienced this, as the crazy dopamine hits, you understand the wild highs and then the unbelievable lows that come. And for me, the biggest difference came when from happiness being these crazy highs, absolutely wild, and then dropping down nothing, where satisfaction, it's much more sustainable, it's more stable, it's more consistent.
Right, exactly. I couldn't agree with you more. Could you tell me about a time when you might have chosen satisfaction over happiness for that reason, and why that may have been a better choice for you?
So years ago, I don't talk about this side of my life nearly as much, but years ago, it feels like a different lifetime, I was a musician. I was actually a touring musician. Yeah, it was
That's awesome.
It's fun, man. Oh, there's something special there. But from that time, I was the drummer, so percussion and then drum set. But I've always loved writing, and so I would really, in order to get into what I'm writing, similar to method acting, where you put yourself in the situation, you mentally put yourself there, I would do that with songs. And so there was one year where, to answer your question, where choosing satisfaction over happiness became necessary. One year I was writing songs, and 3 of my really close friends all ended long-term relationships within about 2 months of each other. And so, being an empathetic person, I was like, cool, I'll take all this on. That boils over, like, I can't, without releasing that, it would kill me. So I started writing these really deep, sad songs. What I realized is, yes, it's a release, but it was also this massive crash. There's one thing to be like, oh, I'm there for you, I can help. That's a high. But then to actually put yourself into that in the way that I would when I was writing songs, it would bring me down this crash. And that is what triggered me to look at how I write songs. And so I realized all the times I would write lyrics, that's what I would do. I would put myself emotionally into the situation, which came out with these beautiful lyrics, but just completely unsustainable. Not for my mental health. Like I would write this beautiful song, and then I could barely get out of bed for 3 weeks. Like, it just completely knocks me out. And that was when I actually pulled back from writing. I made a conscious choice to say, I can't do this. As much as I love this, I can't consistently do this anymore. I have to choose satisfaction, as we talk about. I have to choose a more consistent level instead of these crazy highs and these absolutely insane lows. For me, that's the first example that comes to mind anyway.
That's an amazing example. And I also think that fact that you compared it to method acting, because we hear about that a lot from actors. Like we just heard about that, a similar thing from, I think that it was maybe Matthew Damon in Oppenheimer. I think he said it put him into a deep depression after doing Oppenheimer. And we've heard about it from other actors who say that when they do these roles, like, you know, some of them have even said that they take great periods of time off after because the roles take so much out of them. And I think that you're right, that it sounds like as much joy as you were getting out of the music, it was draining you so much. That's actually a great example. It was draining you so much that you had to choose a satisfying life over the, you know, the joy that you would get from the music because
Yeah.
it was too much drain.
There's actually, that is exactly right. And I think there's actually, do you mind if I give another example?
No, I love it. Give an
Okay,
example.
cool.
Give an example.
There's a very practical one that comes to mind. I always used to teach people pursue your passion. That was growing up until I was like early 20s. That was I shout it from the rooftops. That was my claim. Pursue your passion, live your life for that way. And um, what that story that I just explained was one of the things that pulled me back a little bit from that. But another was when I realized I I was touring a lot and recording, living out of a van, sleeping on strangers' floors. It was, there's nothing like it in both the positive and negative side. There's absolutely nothing like it. Nothing compares. But at the same time, when you realize I am not living my life in a sustainable way, and B, if my end goal was just to be music and that's it, then hell yeah, that's fantastic. But if I want to have a family, if I want to have a relationship, if I want to actually impact lives at a grand scale, you need income. You need the more income you can make, the more impact you can have. And I realized I wasn't going to have a satisfied life. I would have a happy life in a narrow area, but I wouldn't have a satisfied life if I continued down this one path. And that's actually what made the switch into the roles that I am now, where I help businesses grow.
That's awesome. That's a great example. It also shows how diversification of life can absolutely lead to satisfaction. I mean, that's something that I try to get people to think about, is that sometimes narrow, as exciting as it can be, speaks to your passion comment, doesn't necessarily lead to satisfaction, because diversification leads to satisfaction. And you are the epitome of diversification. It's something I love. I'm
Thank
going to
you.
love talking to you about, because you are like the epitome of diversification. Another question that I wanted to ask you is, so in my book, I talk about 6 techniques that help people lead a satisfied life: active self-reinforcement and self-care, closing out tasks, making decisions, facing fears, reducing people-pleasing behaviors, avoiding assumptions. Of those 6 techniques, which one do you think you struggle with the most, and why?
Hmm. Mm-mm. Changes. It changes. And at present, it is the first one you mentioned, the self-reinforcement. My podcast, and we talked about that at length, and that was so much fun. And that was incredibly helpful for me. But the at present, that is the one where I have yet to be consistent in my self-reinforcement. I over the last probably 1, 2, 3, we're 2023 now, right?
Yep.
So we're looking at the last like 5 years. I followed a similar path that you outlined, came from completely different sources, right? So like I came from people like Ed Milet, people like Andy Frischella, people Jordan Peterson, like a very different crowd, and taking bits and pieces of what they teach across my journey. And it's gotten me through like people pleasing. A lot of it got me through closing tasks, making decisions. Those were huge, huge hurdles for me to overcome, and to be a much more consistent, self-reliant person and identity. And that has been huge. But the step that I have yet to cross and the battle that I'm facing is that consistent self-reinforcement. that has been the struggle.
Can you explain why we talked a little bit about this when you and I talked on the podcast? Can you explain why you feel like it's so important? Because I think that the reason you're finding it difficult to actively self-reinforce will resonate with a lot of the listeners, because it is one of the strategies that is difficult for a lot of people. So maybe you can explain a little bit from your perspective why it's difficult
Yeah,
to do it.
for me, it's difficult to, how do I say this? To show myself that we're going to get real personal. You're a psychologist. We're going to get real personal here. For everyone listening, you're about to get to know me really well. Growing up, I was heavily to what actually occurred to me today with some behaviors that I had that I did. I was like, oh, 6 years ago, I would have never just asked someone if they could shut the door when I'm in the sauna. I would have been like so inconvenient for them, like little things. It was so far out for me. And I believe for myself, this is one of those lingering things where I haven't believed it is important enough. Actually, I think there's two. I like the verbally processing out here. Two. One, I haven't believed it's important enough. And two, I didn't make this connection that you pointed out in the podcast, and that is that the self-reinforcement is reinforcing the standard that you set. That is so important. You hear from the world that I come from, you in the business world especially, you hear about setting your standards. These high performers that they just have higher standards, raise your standard. You only fall to the standard you have. All of this, it is good advice and it is accurate, but it's so high level that there's so little practicality behind it. And one of the things that I love from your book is how practical it is. It takes that concept. Okay, how do you set a standard? Well, you decide what that standard is, and then you self-reinforce until that becomes normal. And that was a piece that I had yet to unlock until our conversation.
That's awesome. And do you feel like it's helped you a little bit do it, or like feel like you're on the
Uh,
path?
yeah, so it's great. I'm glad that you asked. It has. The one of the things that I have been in the what do you say, in the weeds doing right now is focusing a lot on my health. I'm trying to trim down. I'm trying to get to a sub 10 body fat. It's just one of those things that I've been struggling to do on my own. I hired a personal trainer about a week ago. Things have been going phenomenal. And one of the things that I'm doing in order to self-reinforce is at the end of every day, I have these specific foods that I absolutely love, that are macro friendly, that I absolutely love, and I will not eat them until the end of the day. Super
I love that.
simple. Yeah, super. And it's like, okay, did I meet my macros? Like, I track my macros. That's how I do it. So I account for eating them at the end. I'm like, I will do that, but the only way that I'll eat that is if I ate appropriately throughout the rest of the day. And so it's this little bit of extra to look forward to, but then also it's like at the end of the day, I get to enjoy this. I get to really take this pleasure in it. It's that dopamine hit, a little bit of happiness in there. But then because I did everything else throughout the day exactly as I said, this is what I'll do because I did it. I can reward myself with a little bit of that happiness there.
That's great. And it's great because you set the standard. It wasn't based on a should,
Yeah.
or you should do it like this, or somebody else's, pre-prescribed notion of what it should be like. It's because you set the goal, and that's
Exactly.
That's great.
Exactly.
That's great. Do you find that your satisfaction or level of satisfaction has helped your overall level of confidence and your overall level of resilience?
Yes, incredibly so. Like I said, I came from the world of discipline. Growing up, my life model, go big or go home. I always pictured myself as a kid as a rhino. Like, I don't care what's going to happen. I'm going to put my head down and I'm just going to move forward. Doesn't matter what's in my way. That's the mental image I had as a kid. As what happens for a lot of us as we get older, life happens. Life gets in the way. You start to not make those conscious choices. You start to, oh, I'll do this. Yeah, absolutely. And then you go back on your word. You don't. I'll show up at 6 and you say, okay, last minute you bail. Oh yeah, no, I'm definitely hitting the gym on Monday. Monday comes around, you're like, no, I'm gonna wake up at 5 a.m. on Tuesday. 5 a.m. comes around, you hit snooze, right? We make those choices. And for me, going through the program called 75 Hard is how I got there. For me, that program, for anyone who's not familiar, it's I think like 7 or 8 separate things that you do every single day, and that includes two 45-minute reading 10 paid minutes. You're at one point you're taking a 5 minute cold shower. You're talking to a stranger every single day. You may think that's not that much. If you try talking to a different stranger, having a genuine conversation every day, that is difficult. You have to be intentional.
Yeah.
And I ended up doing that for the program. It's 75 days and then you can extend it longer. I went for a year and
Wow.
that rebooted so much of the habits that I had lost. These habits and this self-confidence that, hey, this is who I am. When I say I will be there, I will be there. When I say I will do something, I will do something because I said I would. That, no, and to tie this into what you're saying, to show that there's this connection, a lot of those things that they have you do every single day do not get you happiness. Working out at 4 a.m. outside in the rain sucks. There is nothing fun about that. One time I was traveling and I think I had 16 hours of travel. I got up at like 3 or 4, I think it was 3, did a 45-minute run outside. And then I am traveling, so I'm in the airport, and my next workout is I'm sitting on the plane, and I had this water bottle. It was actually about 3 of these wide, or 3 of these long. It's a gallon and a half. It's massive, and I literally just took it and did curls in my seat for 45 minutes. All of these crazy looks. People will look at you and say it's and be like, "What the hell?" It sucks. It absolutely does. But I said I would do it. So I did it. That at the end of the day, literally every single day, I was like, this day was hard, but I am damn satisfied. And that confidence, you can't buy that. Like, I don't care what happens, Jeff, you cannot buy that feeling, and that shows everywhere you go out in your life.
And then, okay, so that's a perfect example of confidence. And then wouldn't you say in that same way that if you were to like come up against like a challenging situation or like an adverse situation, that because of all that discipline and all those ways in which you were doing those things that made you feel satisfied and confident, that would, you'd bring resilience to a challenging situation because of all that confidence building that you did
Oh yeah.
through all of the, all of those
Oh,
efforts.
totally. A friend of mine, Kyle, he's a Superhuman Fathers here on Instagram. He's phenomenal. He had said this statement. It stuck with me. To go right to this point, he said, um, "I don't hop in the shower." He takes a cold shower every single day. First thing in the morning, he said, "I don't hop in a cold shower because I like it. I hop in the cold shower because who I am afterwards." He hops in the cold shower every single day because of the person he becomes after he does it. He can show up. He's like, that was hard as all get out. But who I am afterwards, that matters. That's why I do it.
Right.
Same thing here.
Exactly. I love that because I
Yeah.
think that mentality of like, hey, look what I did. I just did that it's so important. It's so important.
It's so
Yeah.
important. I've heard a lot of people talk about like they say the law of I think he said the law of ambient temperatures. If you have an easy life, if you're like, okay, I want the easiest life I possibly can, you're gonna do the easiest things and have the hardest life. But if you purposefully choose to do the things that you deem as necessary, this is what I have to do to be satisfied. If you do that no matter what, then your life in the end, even though you're doing the harder things, life will become easier. It's this weird
Yep.
reversal, but it
Definitely.
makes sense. I feel it a lot.
Definitely. Uh, okay, so you had this, you work for an investment firm that helps scale businesses. At what point did you feel like it was necessary for your satisfaction to add on top of that this podcast, Coffee with Klingman, that I love? But how did you know that that was there was a moment in time where for your satisfaction, you needed to diversify in that way?
Um, a couple points there. One is it initially started actually less out of satisfaction, more out of curiosity and in the pursuit of happiness. So at the time, I had already given up, like put aside music. I said, I'm done with that. I don't want to at least pursue that as a career. I don't want to do that. And so I went into helping businesses. And then it was while I was doing this, while you are in the weeds of doing the things that will produce a satisfied life, it is hard or it is important to remember to allow the bits of dopamine and the bits of happiness in there to not completely cut it out. And for me, that was a lesson I had to learn the hard way. I went in the course of 2 years leading up to 2018, so 2017, 2019. So leading up to 2019, 2017, 2018, I went and read 100 books each year. I was going full time to school. I was working part time in a relationship and trying to start a business. That I literally didn't have time to do anything. And my go big or go home was my mentality. I had said if I'm going to go into this business world, I need to learn everything I can. And great, but the downside is I didn't allow any of those self-reinforcing behaviors. I didn't allow any of that happiness to come through. And so what I realized is I'm lost in these books. I'm lost in these courses. It's fun, but I have no human connection. And to me, I thrive on that. And so I literally started the podcast initially just out of I need that dopamine hit. And as I started to do it, I realized it was so much more than that. To me, I realized my skills of finding questions, getting to the heart of answers is something I didn't realize I had that skill. It's something that I love. I didn't realize I had this skill of communicating and really being able to make a guest feel comfortable so they can open up. I didn't realize I actually really enjoyed all of these things that at the time were just side benefits. So over the course of about a year, I was like, oh, wait, no, this is actually a huge part of my life. It's a huge part of who I am. This is just an extension of it. So now anything like work can be great, work can be terrible. It doesn't matter. It's not all of who I am. There's that diversification that you had mentioned. Podcast can be great, podcast can be terrible. I have the work. Relationship can be great, relationship can be terrible. There's other things in my life, so my identity doesn't go, yes, amazing, and then absolutely crushing down to nothing.
Right. That's awesome. So gives you diversification, gives you balance. It
Yeah,
helps with the balance.
yeah,
That's awesome.
exactly.
That's awesome. Okay. So then another question related to the diversification is that do you feel like it is the diversification, the travel, the podcast, the your career with the investment fund, all of those things, do you feel like it is because I like to talk to people about diversification of interest. Do you feel like it is that diversification of interest because you have so many of them and you are the epitome of that? Do you feel like all of those things have helped with living a satisfied life? Because just like you said, if one isn't going so well, then you can, pivot and look at another one and get some of your confidence back from something else. So do you feel like it is the combination of all of these things that sort of together has helped the foundation of satisfaction and confidence and resilience, because you don't feel like if one thing topples, then it all falls down?
That is exactly accurate. That is exactly accurate. Insert my last long answer right here. Yes. That is spot on. What about for you? I'm intrigued. What is your experience, Ben? Because you have a very diversified life. So what has your experience been?
My experience is similar in that I feel like I have, I have my private practice, which I love,
Hmm.
meeting new people, seeing new clients, then also like watching clients evolve.
Hmm.
So there's the private practice part. And then there's the sustainable life satisfaction part, which is very exciting. And then also the creative part of sustainable life satisfaction. How do I get more people to know about it? So it's not just sustainable life satisfaction as the brand, which I feel like I built, but also what creative ways can I get this into the hands of more people? And then that spins into so many diversified avenues. So whether it's Instagram Live, or whether it's podcasts, or whether it's, writing blogs, or, I mean, it's honestly, it's endless, the things that, so if you look at my desk, it's filled with sticky notes of creative ideas of like, what's the best octopus way to get sustainable life satisfaction into everything? So that's to me
Fascinating.
how I diversify my career interests, and
Hmm.
and that part has been exciting. So then if one of them doesn't work,
Hmm.
which is what happens, like one
Totally.
of them I'm like, doesn't work. And I'm like, okay, well, that didn't work, but I have all of these other things that may work or may
Mm.
not. And I think that that really does help with resilience, you know, failed or chose the wrong avenue, because there's other avenues to try. You can pivot. And as anybody who has read the book or knows anything about sustainable life satisfaction, pivoting is really important, and not beating yourself up for having tried something and then feeling like it, because it didn't work out, that says anything negative about you.
Totally. So, correct me if I'm in this. For someone who, let's say, they don't have the mental energy, emotional energy, experience, and they're saying, "Oh, I can't diversify like you. I don't have the practice, the ability to travel, all these things." You're saying there's actually a couple levels of diversification. One, there's the general big categories, but another is more granular, is looking at what you're doing and saying, "How can I diversify the process of what I'm doing?" For you, you're saying like, "Okay, this could be looking at the sustainable lifestyle, looking at this and saying, well, I can do, or sustainable, the word just escaped me.
Life satisfaction.
Thank you. Looking at that and saying, uh, creating that into other hands, you can look and say that could be Instagram Live, that could be podcasts, that could be blogs, that could be guests, it could be 1,000 things. But then in a much more granular way, or at a high level, diversification could be that. It could be a private practice. It could be 10 other things.
Exactly. So it could be that you could look at diversification. For me, it's like, okay, private practice, sustainable life satisfaction. Okay, I like to travel. I like to go theater. You could look at diversification like that. Or exactly what you said, you could look at it at a granular level, that because I love private practice, my private practice is built of this, and sustainable life satisfaction is built of all of these diversified things,
Mm,
so that I'm not so tied to any one of them that if one of them
mm,
fall apart, that means like I'm so ego invested in any one of them, and
mm.
it doesn't mean that I can't pivot or maintain my creativity, which I think is something similar to what you're saying, which is that if nothing is hinging on any other thing, which is the beauty of diversification.
Mhm.
For people that struggle with diversification or are, linear, which is why I try to encourage people to, have balance, try new things, have a lot of hobbies, because I think that if one thing isn't going the way that you want, then you want to be able to put that down, walk away, take a beat, and try something else.
Yeah, yeah, that that makes so much sense. And looking at my own life, back before back when I was like literally on government housing, like I making $12 an hour at the peak while I was working at Starbucks, I couldn't afford anything. And I was looking and saying, okay, I remember having these conversations. How can these, because I remember reading about diversification of your life. I was like, how could I do that? Like, I can't travel. I can barely afford to get to work, right? I can't have a diversification of interest because I can't afford to get into anything. I was like, what can I do? And I remember thinking, oh, I work at Starbucks. I can at least on a very granular level diversify my day, if nothing else. And it's
Yes.
how do I approach a conversation? How do I approach an interaction? What if I am going to approach the how am I going to approach a situation that's happening? Is this my role? Can I do this role differently? And just finding some way to diversify. And even just those little super granular things helped
Right.
immensely.
And you can do that by like exactly what you said, like what kind of like customer feedback could you get that would be different based on different things, and work on that in a granular level. Or say, I'm going to do my job at Starbucks, and then let's say you like reading, so I'm going to try to work on this genre of books, or I'm going to try to
Yes.
hike this number of things, and I'm going to go on walk this number of steps, or diversify in other different ways that don't cost money, that are along the lines of things that you like, so whether it's, a hobby that's, walking or reading or crocheting or honestly building Legos, it doesn't matter as long as you feel like you're doing things that push the level of your competence in some way because
Mhm.
it's challenging in some way, whether it's like you said, you read 100 books in a year. So if you decide like, okay, it's easy, I don't know whether it was or wasn't, 100 books is like this or 50 books is like this, well then 100 books is either a challenge or it's not, but whatever is a challenge, do that.
Come on, come on. What was your process for discovering? Actually, no. What is the one of the things that have been the most challenging and most rewarding things for you?
Well, I mean, all of it.
Fair. I relate to that a lot.
I mean, I think a lot of life is that because the
Mm,
reward is in the
mm,
challenge. I mean, you were saying
come
that,
on.
I mean, I really do think that they are the same thing, like
Yeah.
every time I look at something and I'm like, I'm not sure I can do that. Or I joke with people a lot. I'm like, my head's going to butt up against the ceiling at some point and I'm going to hit my head really hard because I'm like, somebody's going to say, Jennifer, what do you think you're doing? You have no business here. But,
I
you
love
know,
it. Yes.
so
Yes.
I feel like each thing that I try,
Mhm.
if I can do it, then that's a reward in and of itself. So I don't know,
Mm,
both.
yeah.
I think I would maintain that it's both.
Yeah. Exactly. If something comes easy, it's not a challenge, the
No,
reward isn't there.
no.
Yeah. Totally.
That's why I was talking to somebody today and they were talking about how they felt upset because their child hadn't been called out for something,
Mm,
and everybody else on a team had been called out. And
mm,
the fact of the matter is that she hadn't played as well as some other people on a team.
mhm,
And I was like, honestly, I think, did she complain? And they said no, that she hadn't complained. I'm like, bravo for your daughter, because I actually think that maybe she would have felt uncomfortable if she had been called out positively until she
mm,
does play well. And she's probably waiting to play well for the call out. So bravo to
mm.
her. She
Yeah.
probably wants the reward when she meets the challenge.
Yeah. Yeah. If you give that reward super early, then it's like, okay,
What
well, what's the
does it mean?
what does it mean? It takes away so much of the value from it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. That's one of the reasons why like I'm super stoked in the fitness that I'm in, and the fact that like I'm not sub 10% body fat. I am very excited about that because it means it's a I don't know if I can swear here. It is a very difficult challenge to get there, and so the reward when I get there is going to be
Yeah.
phenomenal. Yeah,
Exactly. Exactly.
totally get it.
Exactly. Have you ever noticed that you're like over focusing on perfectionism or happiness, and then that has like in a negative way impacted your self-satisfaction?
Oh yeah, yeah, oh yeah. Um, yeah, that's fine. We've talked a lot of personal stuff here today. Let's go right for it. Um,
For both of us.
one, exactly, exactly. One of the things that I absolutely love is writing. One of the things that is the most difficult thing in my life is writing. I years ago I wrote a book and it was about managing employees. I had a lot of experience doing that. And I went through it really quick and I was like, whoo, this is actually not that hard. Which is crazy. It's incredibly difficult. Fast forward to this past year, and I've started working on a writing project. And what I have found is there are so many inner voices that I have that I didn't necessarily have, or rather didn't listen to before. Where now that I have a modicum of, like a little bit of success doing something, I have this voice that says, hey, you have a little success. There's more people watching. There's more people who are waiting for this. This better be perfect.
Mhm.
And that stops me from writing more than anything else. Um, I have not written nearly as much as I would like to because of that voice. So, in a very real, present, and honest way, yeah, and that sucks.
Mhm. And have you figured out any way yet to center yourself so that the perfectionism isn't getting in the way as much, or you're still struggling with that?
Both. So I have found some practices that help, and I don't practice them as much as uh, I hate saying should. I
Mhm.
don't practice them intentionally as much as I would like. I can say that.
Mhm.
Um, and so one of the practices is to put myself, like you said, centered, to put myself in a specific frame of mind where I say, cool, I'm not here to write for anyone else. No one else will read this. This is just for me. It's whatever is going through my head. And I take away all of the pressure, because the pressure, it's not actually there, it's just in my head. I just have these thoughts, right? So I take away all of that pressure mentally and say, cool, doesn't matter what's actually happening here. None of that is real. What's real is I'm sitting down and I'm just going to try and get something that's in my head onto the screen. That's it. That helps a lot. I haven't done that as much as I would like, but that does help.
Mhm.
And I think
Yeah.
that's part of that self-reinforcement, because I've found the behaviors that I like and I have not self-reinforced them.
Right. And it also sounds like, I mean, since I focus on my techniques because that's my brand and that's what I'm thinking about all day long, but it also sounds like you're trying so hard to get this, quiet the assumptions, quiet the people pleasing, because it's not, I mean, what you're experiencing is so common. I talk to people about it all the time. Once, all eyes are on you or
Mm-hmm.
feel like all eyes are on you, it becomes so much harder to quiet the noise. And then the mantra of like the people pleasing can start, like I want people to like this as much as they liked other
Mm,
things, or like whatever, and that can definitely start. And then you want it to be as well received, so then the people pleasing comes in, and then the assumptions are also there, and quieting all of that noise
yeah,
is difficult but so important. So it
yeah,
sounds like that's what you're trying to do to center yourself. And then if you can, then you're right.
yeah,
Rewarding yourself for
yeah.
quieting it would be a great positive feedback loop for your brain.
That's a great. I hadn't put that together as this is a uh, or not a self. This is a people-pleasing behavior from instead of the individual. This is from the individual to a scale. It's that same idea.
Yeah.
Um, I remember experiencing this back with music when you'd write a song and it's really well received, and you're like, cool. Now we have to write something just as well. There was always that extra pressure. I hadn't, it's been a long time since I've done that, so um, I haven't experienced that in a while. Never occurred to me that this is that same thing. Thank you. That's a really great insight.
Oh, great. Awesome. I hope it helps.
Oh, it will. It will. Absolutely.
um, do you ever find, because you like we've been talking about how many things you do you ever find that because of all of the passions that you pursue, that then it's hard to balance that against other things in your life? I mean, you talked already about wellness, but personal relationships, family, friends, loved ones, like, do you ever find that that's difficult? Or do you feel like making sure that there's balance in everything in your life is something that you don't find difficult?
It's very difficult. It is very, very, very difficult. I have gotten better over the last 2 years, and for zero credit to me, 100 to my fiance, that that's happened. If it In my mind, I always pictured myself, like I said, the bulldog, the rhino, put his head down and go. Literally a coach that says go big or go home. Like that has been my life for as long as I can remember. And so when I get excited or passionate about something, I'm in. And like that is all in. As you can imagine, you get excited, you're passionate, you're all in, everything else falls away. Like I mentioned earlier, from like 2017 to 2019, I was reading 100 books a year, full time in school. Like that is a prime example of the downside of going all in like I would. And the relationship I was in was very negative. Excuse me, it was very, and I don't use this term lightly, toxic. I don't use that term often. Great. She was a great human. I was a great human. We brought out the absolute worst in each other. It was and we stayed together for almost 3 years. And so you can imagine how hard that was. Through that time, one of the things that finally made the disconnect was that had no time for her. And I was putting all of my time and energy into what I was doing, into, okay, I want to learn business so I can help other businesses grow. And that balance is something that I personally have never found a way to have. I've heard people explain it in my circle of like, oh, there is no business. You're all, I don't have a pen. You're all a pen, if we imagine this. And sometimes life goes up and you put a lot more focus into one thing, and sometimes life goes here and you put more focus into here. And I get that. Um, but for me, I have never been able to I can get that on an intellectual level. I've never been able to live that. What has helped has been my fiance, who um, she's incredibly present, incredibly caring, and is very attuned if I am not.
Oh, that's cool.
Very attuned. Oh yeah, that you you know that is it is the it's a huge blessing. It is a lot of positive pressure. It's
Hmm.
not like oh, you better be. It's like I know we have set between her and I, we have set a standard that this is how we interact with each other. When we are here, we are here. When we are present, we are present. And so it becomes very that that's how she's helped me find the balance. That's how I'm going to say that.
That's really good. And it shows, I mean, obviously a lot of good and transparent communication and follow through, which
A lot of yeah.
is amazing because it's not just making the commitment, but closing on the commitment, following through on the commitment, which
Exactly.
is
It's almost like you
awesome.
wrote a book on this or something. It's crazy.
Where they're like,
Mhm.
just, only because like you point out things that are like lead to satisfaction, and it is like closing on the fact that you
Mhm.
both expressed your needs and you're
Mhm.
meeting them is why it's also working and helping both of your satisfaction. So
Yeah.
that's awesome. Um, so do you feel like there's things about happiness versus satisfaction that I'm missing that I haven't asked you about?
Um, the thing I want to say, actually, I want to say it, but I want to say this in a more succinct way. I've hinted to it, I've implied it. I want to say it more succinctly. So often we tend to fall into two camps, and I clearly am an example of one, right? So we tend to fall in this camp where it's an all or nothing. It's a black and white, where you're like, okay, all about the dopamine, and I literally lived for that for years. Or it's like, okay, all about the building yourself and building for your future. And I spent 3 or 4 years living in that, much more recently. And there's this balance that people uh, your life is more satisfied when you find that balance of I am going to have the foundation, should do it this way. I'm going to have that foundation of satisfaction that I say I'm going to do something and I will. I have that foundation and I'm going to reinforce that with that happiness. With that dopamine hit, with that extra things that can just put you right over the edge, and I love that. It's not a either or, it's a both and.
I love that. I love that. And along those lines, do you feel like there's a piece of advice you could give us, or a mantra, or something that's
Mm,
helped you, carried you through so many things because you've done so many things and succeeded in so many things? Although I'm sure there have been like rough patches because there are for all of us. But so do you feel like there's a piece of advice or mantra or something that you've said to yourself that has carried you through that might help all of us?
yes. So many years ago, I was very religious. I was raised in a cult. I was Christian. Like, there's a whole backstory here, which is my personal favorite part of my backstory. But I got a tattoo, and it's Romans 8:28.
Oh,
Um, can't
cool.
really see. And so, if you're Christian, and you may know that verse, it's all things work together for good. It's the first half of that verse. All things work together for good. That concept got me through so much that went wild in my life. It's gotten me through trauma, abuse. It's gotten me through poor relationships. It's got me through every decision I've made. And the more in the last couple of years, as I've stepped back more into spirituality, the what has gotten me through it wasn't necessarily the verse, all things work together for good. It was the belief that they do. Regardless of how it feels in the moment, regardless of what it looks like, regardless of what circumstances seem like around you, the belief that, hey, things are going to look up, things are going to turn out good. It's fine. This sucks, and it doesn't have to be good in the moment. It doesn't have to be all roses and sunshine every single time. It can suck, but it's going to turn out all right eventually. If you have that belief, then that belief will start informing your subconscious and you'll start to see in your reality the things that back it. And so you'll start to see how the abuse or the trauma that you went through, or the bad relationships, or poor decisions, or the catastrophes that have happened, how they benefit you as you move along in life. That one belief, that one unlock has allowed me to tap into so many different areas, but also has allowed me to get through a lot of things that has happened in life. We'll say that.
That's so beautiful. That story is amazing. And it shows the critical importance of hope, and hope in the face of the strength of hope in the face
Yeah.
of everything, in order to, and the face, and also how much that helps with resilience.
Yeah.
You know, I think that, I mean, that story is beautiful.
Yeah.
I mean, that was really, thank you for sharing that with us.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. Have me back anytime. This has
Yeah.
been an absolute blast.
I mean, yeah, I love it too. I love talking to you.
Same, same.
um, I'm sure there are going to be people that want to know more about you, or at least I think they should know more about you, because I think you're amazing. So can you tell people how they can find you if they're looking for you? What the best way is to find you?
Absolutely. Um, Here on Instagram, it's Gabriel Klingman. Real simple, easy to find. And the podcast we've referenced to a couple times, it's my passion. It's I love that so much. If you want to go deep on conversations, meet real interesting people, just like we're doing here. It's nice to be on this side, but if you want to see me on the other side and you want to get to know Jennifer on the other side here, then go ahead and check out Coffee with Klingman. YouTube is the primary place for that.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing all your incredible stories, your experiences with us. I learned so much. I'm sure all the listeners learned so much. Thank you for making the time to come on. I really do hope we get to talk again, because it was amazing.
I do as well. I do as well. I'm sure we will. Thank you again. And
Okay.
yeah,
Thank you.
thank you so
Thank you.
much.
Thank you. And for anybody that's looking to find more information about me, or sustainable life satisfaction, or my book Beyond Happiness, the 60 Routes to Lifetime Satisfaction, you can find more information on my website at guttmanpsychology.com, or on my Instagram at guttman_psychology. Thank you so much for joining me on The Key to Happiness is Satisfaction, and I hope to see you here soon. Take care. Bye.